That sound cracked through the air like a whip in a cathedral, sharp echoing from the high ceiling, slicing through the heavy air of a Thursday morning. The pale white hand had just lashed out, leaving a red imprint on the cheek of the black woman standing in the center of Monarch Financial Bank's grand lobby, a place once hailed as the beacon of the elite. "I've called the police. We don't serve people like you here." The customer service manager, Todd Barnes, ensured his voice carried through the bank. Every word was deliberately chosen to mark his territory and to draw a line between the welcomed and the unwanted. A few customers looked up from their loan paperwork. An older woman stopped counting her bills. Several phones clicked into camera mode. And as the entire bank seemed to hold its breath, Danielle Carter didn't move. No reaction, no yelling, no flinching. She raised her head slowly, deliberately, her deep brown eyes locked on the man who had just struck her. Then she smiled, not with bitterness, not with weakness, but a soft, subtle smile, just enough to unnerve the man before her, without him knowing why. Two security guards appeared rushing in, not to restrain Todd, the man who had assaulted a customer, but to encircle Danielle. "Ma'am, please remain still. You are being detained." Again, she did not react. She calmly adjusted her light grey cardigan, smoothed the sleeve of the crisp white blouse beneath the soft wool, and spoke in a voice as gentle as if she were asking for directions. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." Under the harsh fluorescent lights, the red mark on her cheek was stark, and an accusation, but her voice did not tremble. Each word was honed like a blade, shaped by a lifetime of composure in the face of bias. She hadn't come to be served. She hadn't come to open an account. She came to test the system, which had reacted exactly as she anticipated. Danielle Carter, 40 years old, a single mother, a Forbes-recognized CEO and the head of a $9 billion financial group, now stood in the middle of a bank she owned with a red handprint on her face and dozens of phones recording every second. She didn't hide her name, nor did she flaunt her title. She didn't raise her chin out of pride, nor bow it out of humiliation, because everything that happened today was part of the plan. Her name was Danielle Carter, and if anyone had looked just a little closer, they might have noticed that she hadn't walked into that bank like someone begging for service. No bowed head, no hesitant glances. She wasn't unfamiliar with the place. She had only come in character as someone without power. At 40, Danielle had walked paths most of the people in that lobby had only read about in books. She had juggled 3 jobs to earn her MBA, raised her son alone after her husband died in a car accident, and built a financial firm from an old desk in a rented apartment. She wasn't wearing a blazer, she didn't carry a designer bag. She had no gold-rimmed glasses like she did on CNBC interviews. Today she had dressed like a working-class black woman. Nothing remarkable, nothing attention-grabbing. Just one extraordinary fact: she had quietly acquired Monarch Financial's parent company. The deal had closed 3 weeks ago. Only the board and a small circle of insiders knew. The official announcement was set for next month, but Danielle couldn't wait. Because to her, this wasn't just a business deal, it was a debt to the past. Her grandmother, Evelyn Jenkins, had walked into this branch 30 years ago seeking a home loan. Her documents were flawless, income stable, credit history is pristine. But after one glance at her skin color and neighborhood, the banker had said, "We're sorry. Some areas have different requirements." No reason, no recourse. No one cared. The result, Evelyn spent her life renting, losing hundreds of thousands in potential equity money that could have changed the future for generations if only someone had offered her a chance. Danielle never forgot. And she never forgave the system that her family, 3 generations of black women, had endured. Now she stood in the very place that once slammed the door in her grandmother's face to pry it open from the inside. Why the disguise? Why not announce herself and reform the bank from the top down? Because financial reports never show discrimination. Customer analytics never track tone of voice, dismissive stares, or skeptical glances. You can't fix what you haven't seen with your own eyes. That's what Danielle once told her executive board. Despite pushback, despite warnings, she held firm. Because she knew if you want to change culture, you walk straight into the rot. So she entered her bank, as a nobody, to seek justice for a grandmother who never got to speak, to test how a black woman is treated without her power suit or title in a system she now controls. Tuesday, 10:17 a.m. Danielle Carter walked into Monarch Financial's flagship branch, carrying a worn crossbody leather bag, navy slacks, a simple white shirt, and a light grey cardigan. She looked like an elementary school teacher, or maybe a social worker just off shift. No one greeted her, no one offered water, no one asked, "Good morning, ma'am. How can we assist you today?" Instead, she approached the counter and queued behind 4 other customers, not rushed, not noticeable. But every nerve in her body was taut as a wire. She wasn't here to bank, but to witness what spreadsheets couldn't capture. It was no coincidence that Ethan Wells, the youngest associate at the branch, was the first to deal with her. 24 crisp white shirt tie knotted to precision, Ethan was a product of a system that taught procedures, not how to recognize bias in oneself. When it was Danielle's turn, Ethan glanced at her eyes, scanning from her scarf to her worn bag. His voice changed. Gone was his enthusiasm when greeting the white older man before her. What remained was a tone of just polite enough. "You can find all the information about our accounts on the website, or if you prefer, there's an ATM outside to instantly open an account without waiting." Danielle nodded, smiling faintly as if the advice were sincere. But in her mind a bullet point had been added. White customers, invited into private rooms. Black customers, directed to automated services. She responded, still courteous, "I'd prefer to speak directly with an advisor. I have a few specific questions about investment packages." Her voice was soft but clear, and that made Ethan pause. He hesitated, glanced toward the service desk where Todd Barnes sat watching like an invisible warden. Ethan lowered his head and made a call. He didn't say black customer, but everyone understood. Yes, someone walked in, wants to speak to an advisor. No appointment. Yeah, I told her, but she insisted. He hung up and forced a smile. Our advisors are currently busy. It would be much more convenient if you could come back later or use our online service. Just then, the bank's front doors swung open. A white woman, around 30 years old, wearing a grey blazer, slacks, flat shoes, and light makeup, walked in. Same demeanor as Danielle. Same age, same style of clothing, same way of speaking. And instantly Todd Barnes rose from his chair, briskly walked toward the lobby, and extended his hand. "Welcome, ma'am. Are you here to open an account or discuss investment options? I'd be happy to assist you right away." His voice echoed across the lobby, warm, attentive, and assertive. Danielle didn't need to turn around. She knew exactly what was happening. A newly arrived customer was greeted like an honored guest. while she, who had been standing there for 10 minutes, was still being pushed toward the basic services lane. No one realized that the two women were part of a test. One was welcomed, the other owned the place and quietly observed every glance and word. Danielle wasn't angry. She didn't retreat. She said to Ethan in a calm and composed voice, "I can wait. Or if you'd prefer, I can schedule an appointment. I have time." And as Todd Barnes returned just in time to catch her words, everything shifted in a direction he never expected. Todd Barnes walked up to the service desk with the polished smile of an upscale customer service manager, but his eyes were steel cold. "I heard you're interested in opening an account. I'm the service manager, happy to assist." Danielle smiled, not forced, not sarcastic, just the calm smile of someone who already knew the role the other was playing. "I have some questions about savings and investment accounts. I've brought all the required documents." Todd nodded, but didn't offer her a seat, didn't invite her to a private office. He stood upright, trying to retain control. For new customers without prior relationships with Monarch Financial, we recommend starting via our online portal. It simplifies the process. It sounded polite. But Danielle had read hundreds of reports on how financial institutions use efficiency as a mask for discrimination. White clients invited to the desk, walked through step by step. Clients of color online might be easier for you. She responded soft but sharp. "I still prefer to work directly. If I need to wait, I can return later." Todd shifted uncomfortably. His expression flickered like someone catching a whiff of something foul. Then he pulled out the usual card. "We require additional documents for new accounts, especially without an existing credit history with Monarch. Could you show your driver's license, social security card, and a utility bill?" Danielle nodded and immediately produced her ID, SSN, and utility bills for the last 3 months. Still not enough. Todd pressed on. "Can you also provide your tax returns and business registration documents? We need to verify the legitimacy of your self-employed income." A brief pause. Not because Danielle was surprised, but because she was calculating whether the white customers had been asked for the same before her. She looked up, voice steady. "I didn't see those requirements listed in the bank's account opening policies online." Todd didn't flinch. He replied with the industry-trained mix of firmness and faux courtesy. "Policies are applied flexibly on a case-by-case basis. Some accounts carry higher risks and require deeper verification." Higher risk. A black woman dressed modestly with complete documentation. Danielle met his gaze. "I didn't see you call the other customers who came after me a risk. They were taken into private rooms. No one asked for their tax returns." Todd pressed his lips, the fake smile fading. No more civility, just a man whose control was being questioned. "You might want to consider a financial institution that's more appropriate. There's a community credit union 6 blocks down. They're better equipped to serve your kind of client." "You're the kind of client." This time, without hands, the phrase slipped from his mouth like a second slap. Danielle closed her folder, but there was no raised voice, no outburst. She didn't need to win today. She just needed them to show their most authentic selves. "Thank you for your time." And she walked away, leaving the lobby as silent as a church that had just lost its faith. But that wouldn't be the last they'd see of her. She'd return not with a CEO nameplate, but with a confrontation far greater. And next time, she wouldn't come alone. Wednesday morning, the crisp air of early autumn wrapped around the stone facade of Monarch Financial. The glass doors still gleamed. The signage still stood tall. And inside, the guardians of privilege had no idea real power had entered yesterday and was returning today. Danielle Carter walked in for the second time, still in simple clothes, but this time her collar was firmer, her gaze was sharper. Her stance was no longer that of a woman new to banking, but one who had decided she would not be dismissed again. In her bag was a meticulously organized file including driver's license, social security card utility bills, 2 years of tax returns, business registration certificate, bank account statements, credit reports and investment asset confirmations. There was no excuse to turn her away now. She approached the reception desk with a clear professional tone. "I have an appointment to discuss opening a business investment account." She didn't have one but knew the rules say you do, and the tone changes. Sure enough, the young receptionist, a new girl visibly unsure, quickly searched for her name in the system. Nothing. I'm not seeing your appointment, ma'am." Danielle tilted her head slightly, offering a poised smile. "That's odd. A gentleman named Ethan said I could return this morning. But if there's an issue, I have all my documents ready." She opened her bag and laid the organized file on the counter like irrefutable evidence. The receptionist blinked, unable to refuse. "Please, sit while I check with the advisory team." From across the lobby, Greg Stanton, the branch manager, had already spotted her. And when their eyes met, Danielle knew he'd been warned. Greg was the kind of manager who wore a smile but disappeared when problems appeared. Minutes later, he walked out with Todd Barnes beside him. "Good morning, Ms. Jenkins." Greg began using the alias Danielle had signed in with. "I understand there was some confusion yesterday. We want to ensure proper procedures are followed." Danielle didn't react. She extended her hand, courteous. "Nice to meet you. I've brought everything you might need today." Greg glanced over the file. His eyes scanned it slowly, searching for errors. But Danielle knew there were none, only the quiet panic of someone cornered. After a beat, "Margaret will assist you further." Margaret Doyle, a senior advisor, stepped forward. 61 years old, perfectly styled grey hair, the bearing of someone who'd spent a lifetime in banking with biases etched deep into her professional habits. She led Danielle to a desk, not a private room. No water was offered, no questions about her needs. Only this: "I see your documents are quite complete. However, we usually work with clients with at least $250,000 in assets for investment advising. Perhaps you'd like to start with a basic savings account." Danielle looked her straight in the eye. "My portfolio exceeds $500,000, primarily tech stocks and municipal bonds. I'm here to diversify, not to save." An arched eyebrow, a glance down at the folder, a pause. Then Margaret responded evenly, "We'll still need to verify those assets, of course. Our requirements can be quite stringent." Danielle tilted her head slightly. "The couple over there is receiving investment advice. I didn't see them provide any paperwork." Margaret stopped typing. That question was a blade wrapped in velvet. Every client is handled individually. The perfect answer is not illegal, but perfectly discriminatory. Meanwhile, Todd Barnes hovered nearby, pretending to assist, actually supervising. And when Danielle asked why asset verification was needed despite submitting her taxes, Todd jumped in. "Do you have an issue with our process?" Not asking Margaret, not clarifying, targeting Danielle, asserting dominance. She looked up, voice still calm. "I'm simply trying to understand what constitutes standard procedure and what's selectively applied." The air around them began to shift. A few customers cast subtle glances. One lifted a phone. Another furrowed their brow as Todd turned abruptly to greet a newly arrived white customer like an old friend. The difference was no longer a feeling. It had taken form, visible, concrete, and undeniable. Danielle knew the investigation had succeeded, but she wasn't done. Before leaving the desk, she delivered one last question. A white gentleman who came in after me just received a temporary check. Meanwhile, I'm told processing my file will take 7 to 10 days. Can you help me understand why? Todd clenched his jaw. I've already explained. Every case is different. You're free to leave if you're dissatisfied. Danielle stood up. She gathered her documents and smiled. Not because she lost, but because the final act hadn't begun. She already held the win. Thursday. Morning sunlight spilled across Monarch Financial's gleaming glass facade, but inside, cracks were beginning to form beneath the marble calm. Danielle Carter walked in for the third time. Her face was serene. Her stride was steady, but her eyes were as sharp as a blade honed overnight. She wore a simple grey blazer, her hair tied in a tight bun, and carried a slim leather folder. No more pretending to be a newcomer, the performance was over. At the reception, she didn't need to bend the rules. I'd like to speak with someone in charge of business loans. I'm considering expanding my consulting operations. The receptionist, a new face, didn't recognize Danielle, but something in her eyes said, this isn't someone to underestimate. She politely offered Danielle a seat. 23 minutes passed. 3 white customers who arrived after Danielle were called into private offices. Danielle remained in the lobby while Todd Barnes and Greg Stanton whispered across the room, glancing her way. She noticed everything. She wasn't jotting down notes this time. This time, she was remembering for the counter-strike. Finally, Margaret Doyle, the now familiar face, approached, holding a thin folder. This is some general information about our business loan products. No private room, no probing questions about needs, no real interest. Danielle flipped through generic flyers, irrelevant to revenue strategy or capital requirements. I brought my financial plans and growth projections. I was hoping for an actual consultation. Margaret hesitated, glanced toward Todd standing nearby, pretending to take a call, but never looking away. All of our loan officers are currently assisting other clients. But you can leave your documents. Someone will follow up. Right then, the bank doors opened. A white man's sleeves rolled, carrying a portfolio, stepped in. Todd Barnes immediately approached, beaming. Mr. Davidson, great to see you again. Regarding your business expansion loan, Greg is ready for you in room 2. Danielle turned to Margaret. No words were needed. The contrast was daylight. She stood up, didn't wait, didn't retreat. She walked straight to the service desk, where Todd and 2 others were murmuring, and spoke, her voice low but resonant, like a sentence being passed. I just clearly heard, people like that always want special treatment. I want to ask if Monarch Financial's internal policy permits staff to comment on customers by skin color. Silence fell like a hammer. Transactions halted. Several phones were lifted. Ethan, the young associate, stared frozen. Todd turned, growling, I don't know what you think you heard, but don't cause a scene. Danielle didn't flinch. She stood, tall eyes scanning everyone. I've been here 3 days. Each time I've been asked for excessive documentation, denied service, directed to use machines. And today I heard your staff use discriminatory language. Greg Stanton emerged anxious. Ma'am, if you find our service unsatisfactory, we reserve the right to ask you to leave. I'm asking to be treated according to your standards, the same as the customers who walked in ahead of me. Todd stepped closer, his voice lower, laced with threat. "If you don't leave right now, I'll call security." Danielle didn't blink. "Go ahead. I'd love to hear you explain calling security on a customer who asked for fairness." Then in that chilling moment, Todd raised his hand. Another slap, louder, sharper, and echoing across the lobby. Danielle didn't fall. She calmly raised her hand to her cheek, where the red mark bloomed, and looked him dead in the eye. "Thank you. You've just given me the final piece of evidence I needed." The sound of the second slap still rang in the air. Danielle Carter stood there, not crying, shrinking and touching the spot where Todd Barnes's hand had struck. Not to show pain, but to mark his downfall. Gasps rose. A female customer started filming, capturing every second. Ethan covered his mouth with his hand, and somewhere in the background the bank's security alarm softly chimed. Todd, now out of control, snapped, "I've called the police. You're under arrest. We don't serve your kind here." Each word fell like a knife, sharp in intent, dull in collapse. 6 minutes later, the glass doors burst open. 3 officers entered. A middle-aged white man, hand resting on his belt, as if something dangerous awaited. A younger officer behind him, eyes scanning. And finally, a quiet, observant Asian-American woman. Todd rushed forward, voice booming, "She's disruptive, threatened staff, assaulted someone. We had to defend ourselves." Lies, smooth, practiced like someone who'd fabricated stories dozens of times. The senior officer nodded, his eyes locked onto Danielle without checking anything else. "Ma'am, please place your hands in front of you. Step away from other customers." Danielle didn't move. She slowly lifted her hands to shoulder height, not in surrender, but to force every gaze onto the red handprint on her cheek. Her voice rang out clear and composed. "I'm the one who was assaulted. There are security cameras, witnesses, customer videos, and I suggest you verify before making a grave mistake." Her composure gave the officer pause. He glanced at Todd, who now stood stiff. "You said she assaulted someone, then describe what exactly she did." Todd faltered, eyes darting. "The foot is edging backward." "She disobeyed, caused a disturbance, spoke loudly. When I asked her to leave, she advanced. It was threatening." Before anyone could respond, a woman's voice rose from the seating area. "That's not true. He slapped her. We all saw it." Everyone turned. A white woman, about 50, held up her phone. The screen showed Todd's hand striking Danielle, unedited, uncropped. Another voice chimed in, "I've got it on video too, and I heard him say, 'People like her.'" The atmosphere flipped from oppression to awakening, from silence to reckoning. The Asian American officer stepped forward. "We need to see the security footage. Who has access?" Todd started to speak, but Greg Stanton, the branch manager, stepped out. This time, no polite smile. His tone was firm. "I'll authorize access. Follow me, please." Danielle saw something shift in Greg's eyes. Not concealment, but fear. Before the officer stepped away, he turned to Danielle. "Do you want legal representation?" Danielle nodded. "I just need one call. Everything will become clear." She pulled out her phone, dialed a number without needing to look. The line rang twice. "Yes, Miss Carter. Legal is on standby." "Do you want full engagement?" The entire bank lobby fell silent. "Miss Carter, not Jenkins." Todd blinked. Greg's eyes widened. Whispers stirred among the staff. Many were starting to understand. Danielle ended the call. Her gaze now met everyone's without flinching. "My name is Danielle Carter. CEO of Carter Financial Group, and I am the person who acquired Monarch Financial 3 weeks ago. Silence. Then an eruption. Todd took one step back. Greg too. I've been here for 3 days. Not because I needed your service, but to see firsthand how you treat customers of color when they hold no visible power. She turned to the officers. I will not pursue criminal charges, but I have sufficient grounds to terminate 3 employees immediately, and this institution will begin to change starting today. Danielle Carter didn't shout. She didn't slam the table or flash a CEO badge like a weapon. She simply stood in the lobby where the assault had just taken place and spoke each word clearly like a meeting scheduled 3 weeks prior. Todd Barnes, head of customer service, you are hereby terminated immediately. No one moved. Todd stood frozen, his face slowly turned red, not from anger but from losing control in the space he once ruled. Greg Stanton, branch manager, you covered misconduct and allowed a culture of racial bias to flourish under your watch. You are also terminated effective immediately. Greg tried to collect his folder, but his hands shook so badly that the papers spilled. He bent to retrieve them, then stopped midway. Because now bending down wasn't just to pick up papers, it was to bow before the truth. She turned to the advisor's desk. Margaret Doyle, after 40 years in this industry, is this the legacy you choose to pass down? Suspicion toward a black woman with a complete file, cold detachment. When she speaks of investing, I don't need an apology. I need you to leave, today. Margaret rose quietly. No tears, no resistance. She walked back, opened her drawer, and began to pack. No one said a word. Danielle turned to the rest of the staff, those standing behind counters in the waiting area, behind glass partitions. This branch will close for the day. In 30 minutes there will be a mandatory staff meeting. I didn't come here for revenge. I came for reform, and that starts with making sure no one who carries prejudice as a habit remains here another minute. A young staff member, Ethan, timidly raised his hand. Miss Carter, would you like me to help prepare the meeting room? Danielle looked at him and smiled, her first smile of the day. I need you to stay, and I need your honesty in the meeting to come. Ethan nodded, his eyes as if freed from a weight he hadn't known was pressing down. 20 minutes later, 3 people exited the bank, Todd, Margaret, and Greg. Each held a box with personal belongings. No longer walking tall and no longer walking fast. No one in the branch looked up as they left, for all eyes were now on the conference room where the new leader was about to speak for the first time. Outside, a customer waited to shake Danielle's hand. Another recorded a video whispering, I was once denied a loan here. Today I witnessed justice. When Danielle entered the meeting room, everyone was seated. She didn't stand on a podium, didn't hold a microphone. She placed a file on the table, looked at each person, and spoke slowly, clearly. I didn't fire 3 people today for a momentary mistake. I did it because they embodied a system that judged clients by appearance, zip code, and skin tone instead of financial merit. If you remain with Monarch Financial after today, you will work under a new standard, transparency, fairness, and responsibility to the community. The air in the room was no longer fearful, but a mix of relief and awakening. Some nodded, some lowered their gaze thinking, and some were beginning to understand the era of discreet discrimination dressed as policy was over. Less than an hour after Danielle Carter left that meeting, the video of her being slapped was posted online. No effects, no clickbait, just a simple caption: a black woman was slapped for questioning racial bias at a bank. Then revealed, she owns the bank. Within 4 hours, the clip had over 1.2 million views. Comments exploded. Hashtags, hashtag Danielle Carter and a Monarch Financial trended in New York. By afternoon, news crews gathered outside the Monarch headquarters. A local journalist known for covering financial injustice stood on camera seemingly stunned. "We're standing outside Monarch Financial where 3 senior employees were terminated on the spot this morning after being exposed for racial bias toward a customer. The twist, that customer is the bank's new CEO." Headlines emerged: Black CEO assaulted inside her bank. True identity sends shockwaves through the system. The slap that shook American finance. All afternoon, former customers arrived not to transact, but to tell stories buried for years. An older woman who was once asked for 3 forms of ID to withdraw cash. A young Latino man turned away for wearing a hoodie. A black mother recalling the looks she got when asking about student loans for her daughter. All of it was recorded, shared, and for the first time, heard. Danielle Carter didn't appear on camera that day. She didn't need to because her silence had become the loudest voice. She spent the afternoon in closed-door sessions with legal teams, senior executives from other branches, strategic investment partners, and at the final meeting of the day, she said just one line: "I didn't come too close to a few bad doors. I came to dismantle all the wrong ones and rebuild from the ground up." A press release went out at 7:00 p.m. Carter Financial Group commits to fully investigating all Monarch Financial branches. All acts of discrimination will be dealt with swiftly and no lawsuit will be required. We don't protect people, we protect customers and transparency. Danielle Carter, CEO. At that moment, rival banks started sweating. Many issued statements about internal evaluations. But the public was no longer pacified by PR, because now the people had a new icon, a 40-year-old black woman who didn't demand power but demanded justice, who didn't burn the system but walked into it quietly, and exposed it through the actions of those who once looked down on her. That night, a national broadcast aired a special feature. Danielle Carter didn't just stand for herself. She stood for an entire generation, denied banking access for a reason, never listed on any file skin color. And across the country, communities of color began referring to her by a new title: "The Woman Who Made Banking Show Its Face." 6 months passed. No protests, no cameras, just a typical morning at Monarch Financial's flagship branch. But everything had changed. The glass that once divided tellers from customers was removed and open advisory zones replaced old service counters. No barriers, no height differences. And the digital displays no longer promoted elite investment packages. Instead, a banner scrolled across: "Fair service, no balance check, no visual screening. We serve people, not prejudice." Danielle Carter stood in the middle of the lobby, this time not undercover. Black blazer hair neatly tied and a name badge that read CEO, Danielle Carter. No flashbulbs, no applause, just warm glances from employees and customers who now knew who she was and why she was worth trusting. She approached an investment desk where an older silver-haired woman in a plain sweater was speaking with a young associate. Danielle paused and listened. "Yes, ma'am, I've reviewed your stock portfolio. With your current accumulation, you can shift to long-term investments. No need for further asset verification. I can guide you through it now." No skeptical stares, no alternate process, just dignity as it should have been decades ago. Danielle smiled. Not because she had won, but what she had dreamed for her grandmother was now reality for someone else. Under Danielle's leadership, Monarch Financial launched unprecedented reforms. Complete removal of zip code-based client screening, a covert form of discrimination. Standardized public account opening processes across all branches. No more flexible discretion. Workforce restructuring. 45% of new hires came from underserved communities, chosen for ethics and community dedication, not just experience. Each branch now had a community advisory panel where clients could report mistreatment without fear. Many experts had predicted Monarch would collapse after the scandal, but the reality was the opposite. New account openings surged 34% in the first reform quarter. Customer retention rates exceeded industry benchmarks. And most notably, thousands entered a bank for the first time, without fear of being turned away. A reporter asked Danielle in a private interview, "If you could return to the day you were slapped, would you do anything differently?" She paused for a moment, then replied softly, "I only wish I had come sooner." On the wall behind the main lobby, a new plaque was mounted, not gold, not etched with a titan's name, just a silver engraving that read, "My grandmother once walked in here and was turned away. I came back to ensure no one ever is again." Danielle Carter, CEO Reformation, date June 2025, the end and the beginning. Danielle didn't come to conquer, she came to change and to remind the system of one thing: you may review my account, but never assign me a value based on my skin.